Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Memches, Daf 48 of Masechta Shabbis. Quick overview before we begin. Lots of different kind of stuff today. Let's see. So it starts off with two little anecdotes from a story with Rabbah and R Zeira when they visited the Reish Galusa. We then go on to discuss a little bit about insulating with mochin, which are these kind of almost like felt or material that's going to be made into felt. Can you stuff a pillow on Shabbos? We're going to get into that. We will get into garments that are connected with temporary thread. Okay, sounds exciting, right? Small vessels attached to a stove, right? I'm sure you were waiting eagerly for the past 2 months for this sugya. And then we're going to talk about some other Tumah stuff. So really exciting stuff for today. I hope I was able to pique your interest. So I won't keep you waiting any further. We're going to start on Daf Memches Amud Aleph, 2 lines into the page. Rabbah and R Zeira, Iklu Leveresh Galusa. Awesome. So Rabbah and R Zeira. Does Rabbah and R Zeira ring any other bells for anybody? Daf Zayin Amud Beis of Masechta Megillah, the famous, faithful Purim Suda between Rabbah and R Zeira. Come Rabbah Shachtei R Zeira. Rabbah slaughtered Rabbah slaughtered R Zeira. That sounds like a hectic Purim Suda. And then Rabbah brought R Zeira back to life, and then he invited him over for Purim Suda for the next year, and R Zeira said, "I don't think so." Yeah, that was a funny Gemara. Anyways, so Rabbah and R Zeira. I wonder if this was before the Purim Suda. Anyways, so they were visiting the Reish Galusa and the exilarch, and I guess that they were on better behavior. Anyways, so Rabbah and R Zeira Iklu Leveresh Galusa. So they visited the house of the exilarch. And they saw that one of the servants at the Reish Galusa was putting a cup or some kind of kli, some kind of pitcher, epis, full of, that had cold water in it, and he was putting it on top of a hot water urn, so mistamas, that the water would heat up. So Nazhe Rabbah, and Rabbah kind of gave him Rabbah disapproved of that. Amalei R Zeira. So R Zeira said to Rabbah, "Ma'ishna mimechem agabi mechem." Well, 1 second, what's the problem? Right? We say at the end of this parak on Daf Nun Aleph Mebeis, we say that putting a sort of mechem, like hot water container, on top of another hot water container would be acceptable. So what's the problem with putting this kli that is cold water on top of this hot water urn? So the difference is that when you're putting a container of hot water on top of another container of hot water, well then it's just preserving the heat that is already there. Over here it's creating new heat, right? Meaning here the water is cold and you're putting it on top of the hot water, so that's going to actually increase heat, and that is a problem. Okay? And then they saw another thing that this servant was doing that did not meet Rabbah's standards. The paras dastudar apume de kuva. Okay? Ve'anach natala ilave. So this servant, he took his turban and he spread it out. He covered a barrel of wine with it, and then he put the cup or whatever he would use to then scoop out the wine from the barrel, and he put the cup on top of the turban. Okay, so he took his turban, covered up this barrel of wine, and then put this cup on top of it. Nazhe Rabbah, and again, Rabbah was not happy with what this servant was doing. Amalei R Zeira amai. So R Zeira said, Rabbah, what's the problem with putting his turban over the wine barrel? So Amalei hashta chazis. So Rabbah says, look, you're about to see what the problem is. L'sof chazir de kama'atzar le. And what did he see in the end? This servant, after, I guess at the end of the meal, he took his turban and he wrung it out, meaning to get any wine that got absorbed in the turban, he wanted to wring it out from the turban, and that's a problem of schita, right? Of wringing out like water from like a solid, I guess, whether it's food or whether it's a turban, whatever it might be. So Amarle, so Reb Zeira said, "Wow, like that's pretty impressive. How did you know that was going to happen? Ma shnami paronka. Why is this any different than a paronka? Because we know that this paronka, this like other kind of cloth, you would be allowed to extend over a vat of wine. So how come like you knew that the turban was going to be a problem, yet this paronka garment seems to be acceptable? Amarle hasan lo kapiti lavi hacha kapiti lavi. Rabbi says, look, when it comes to a paronka, whatever that cloth is, so no, people aren't makbid on it, and so what? If wine gets on it, so who cares? You're not necessarily going to wring it out. But his turban, I guess he's got to put back on his head. So he wants to wring out whatever wine got in it, and therefore Rabbah knew that this was going to be a problem, and sure enough it was. V'lo b'teven v'chulei, continues the Gemara. So the Mishnah had said that we do not insulate food with straw as long as it is dry, as long as it is wet. If it's dry, then it would be permissible. So, Ba'amine Rav Ada bar Masna me Abaye. Now Rav Ada bar Masna asks Abaye, Mochen shetaman ba'en. So, okay, so what are mochen? Who could tell me? No? What was that? I can't hear. Louder? What? Anyways, so what are mochen? So mochen are basically bits of like some kind of cloth fabric. So like maybe some cotton or some wool, things like that. And you're going to make it into felt, right? So this is sort of more expensive than straw. I guess you have plenty of straw lying around, but these materials that you want to further make into felt, so they're more expensive, and they're also, I think, what is it? And so, right, and Rashi says in the Dibra Maschem Mochen, he says, "Umuktzin hein lemelacha v'asul l'taltalan," right? And they're muktzah for the melacha, meaning they're still in the middle of being processed, right? So generally, you wouldn't use these materials on Shabbos because you would leave them alone so you could develop them into felt. But this person, for whatever reason, insulated food with this felt. So the question is, now that you have insulated the food with the felt, so does that make this felt kilu not muktzah? Meaning in general it would be muktzah because you have no purpose of using it on Shabbos because you're going to be processing it. I don't know if I said using this felt, but this mochen, right? Meaning generally this mochen would be muktzah because it's in the middle of being processed into felt, and therefore you have no business kind of moving it on. It has no purpose on Shabbos, so it would be muktzah. But in this case, it does have a purpose. You're using it to insulate your food. So maybe it shouldn't be muktzah. So that's the Gemara's kasha. So I'm going to start from the beginning, from the two dots. So Ba'amine Rav Ada bar Masna me Abaye. So Rav Ada bar Masna asked Abaye, Mochen shetaman ba'en. So if you use these mochen as an insulation on Shabbos, so ma'u l'taltalan b'Shabbos, can you then move them on Shabbos, right? Can we assume that they've been, considered min hamuchan, that they're prepared, and therefore you can move them? Amarle. So Abaye said, Just 1 second. In general, you think that just because a person can't find any straw to insulate his pot, he's gonna take this mochen that he's gonna be processing into felt that is more valuable, and he's just gonna use that for insulation, right? Imagine taking your new suit that you bought, right? And you're just gonna use that for insulation of your pot. You're not gonna do that. And therefore, the fact that this person did this crazy thing, such as using mochen for insulation, that's not, he would be the exception to the rule, right? It says Rashi, in the Dibra Maschel, Omeru mafke lechach kupa shel mochen, he says, Shedamea yikarin, it's valuable, ein derech bechach velo batle latmana. This is not normal, this is not the regular way things would be done, and therefore, it doesn't, right, the hatmana isn't going to be mevatel, sort of, right? They don't become batel to latmana, which would then mean that, since they're used for Azmana, then for Atmana, then you can use them on Shabbos. But here we're saying, no, this sort of exceptional case is not going to be enough to, remove the mochin from their general muktzah status on Shabbos, and therefore they're going to remain muktzah on Shabbos. That is Abaye's opinion. So now the Gemara says, Lema Misayele. Let's say that the following Brisa supports Abaye's notion that you would not be allowed to, right, that the mochin would remain muktzah even after they've been used for atmana. So the Brisa says, Tomen begizde tzemer, you can insulate with like wool shearings, uvitzipe tzemer, and wool that's been sort of processed a little bit more, vilshonos shel argamon, and then wool that's been like, combed and dyed, uvimochin, as well as with mochin, ve'ein metaltalin osan, and yet you're still not allowed to move them even though you use them as insulation. And guess what the Gemara says? Imishumha lo irya. If you're really going to bring this brisa, forget it. It's not going to make any difference, right? This brisa is not going to be a proof for Abaye. Hachi kamer, this is what the brisa is saying. Im lo taman bo'en ein metaltlin osan. If you didn't use them for insulation, then that is when you may not move them. However, if you use them for insulation, you would be allowed to move them. So the Gemara says, well, ihachi mai lememra. Well, then what's the chiddush? If that brisa is saying that if you didn't use these mochin or this tzemer as insulation, then you wouldn't be allowed to use them. You wouldn't be allowed to move them. Obviously, they're muktzah. So I may have thought that actually maybe these materials, you can lean on them, right? Because they used to lean when they would eat, they would sit and they would lean on something. So maybe these mochin and stuff, even though they're going to be made into felt later on, but you could still lean on them, so maybe they wouldn't be muktzah. Kamash malan, that since since you're not using them for insulation for anything, they're going to be muktzah since they're not considered useful Shabbos, even though you can theoretically lean on them. Rav Chizda shar le'ahadurei udra leveisade b'Shabbata. Now, Rav Chizda allowed you to return pillow stuffing into pillows on Shabbos. If you have a pillow, I have some pillows here next to me. So if you have a pillow and some of the stuffing comes out of the pillow on Shabbos, so you could put it back into the pillow. Eisver Rav Chanan bar Chizda leRav Chizda. So now Rav Chanan bar Chizda asked the kasha against Rav Chizda. What's the kasha? So matirin beis atzaver b'Shabbos aval lo poschen. So you're allowed to, so apparently the launderers, when they would wash shirts, so they would tie up the neck of the shirt. So now, let's say it's Shabbos, and you want to put on your shirt, and you see, oh wow, the neck is still tied from the launderer. So we say, matirin beis atzaver b'Shabbos, no problem. You can undo the knot. Now, we'd have to at some point, we're probably going to talk about like knots, and right, I think kosher and matir is like not supposed to be done on Shabbos. So I don't know. I don't know what this means about knots. Maybe it wasn't like a kesher shakayama. I don't know. Whatever it is, but we say you would be allowed to open up this tie that they use to close the neck. Have a low posrin. However, you would not be able to like cut a new neck out of a shirt on Shabbos. So let's say, I don't know, maybe you had some material that you're making into a shirt, and the last step of opening up the neck was not yet done. You would not be able to take like a razor and slit open a neck for the shirt. Ve'nosnin es hamochin lo l'socha kerev lo l'socha keses b'yomtiv ve'in tzarich lomer b'Shabbos, and you would not be able to put stuffing into either a pillow or a blanket on Yom Tov, and certainly not on Shabbos. So one second, how is Rav Chizda saying that you're allowed to put stuffing into a pillow on Shabbos if we have this brisa that says that you're not allowed to put stuffing into a pillow on Shabbos? What's pshat? Gemara says lo kasha, it's no problem. Habe chadate, habe atike. Depends if it's new or if it's old. If it's new, i.e., you've never actually put any stuffing in this pillow before, meaning all you have is like a pillow casing, and you're like, oh wow, I need a pillow. Here's some stuffing, let me stuff this casing and make a pillow. That would not be allowed. When Rav Chizda says that it would be allowed, and that's what the brisa is talking about. When it says it's not allowed, that's what it's talking about, when it's new. When Rav Chizda says it would be allowed, it's talking about when it's old. You had a pillow, some of the stuffing fell out, you're allowed to put it back in. Tanan Amiyacha, we also have a brisa supporting Rav Chizda. Ein nosnin samochin lo l'socha kerev lo l'socha keses b'yomtiv ve'in tzarich lomer b'Shabbos. You would not be allowed to put the pillow stuffing into a pillow or into a blanket on Yom Tiv, and certainly not on Shabbos. However, Nashu machzir nosum b'Shabbos v'nitzarech loma b'Yom Tiv. If the material fell out of the pillow, then you would be allowed to return it into the pillow on Shabbos and certainly on Yom Tiv. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rab. Said Rav Yehuda in the name of Rab. Haposeach beisat savar b'Shabbos. Somebody who opens up, somebody who basically creates a neck in a shirt on Shabbos. Chayav chatas. Okay, so it's also midoraisa. You chayav chatas. Maskef Rav Kana. Kana asks a kasha. What does he say? Ma binzo l'megufas hachavis. Why should this be any different than the seal of a chavis, of a barrel? Right? Let's say you have a barrel. The barrel has wine. And on top of it, they kind of sealed shut the barrel. So Rashi says something really cool. So in the top Rashi on the page says, Mevi Adam Chavis. So you could take a Chavis, Umatir says Rosha B'Sayif. And you can, remove the top of the barrel with a sword. Umanicha Lefnei Orchim, and then put it down in front of the guests. That's so cool. I've seen before people open up all sorts of stuff, like wine bottles and champagne bottles. I think specifically champagne bottles, actually. I actually saw somebody once on a YouTube video open up I think it was a champagne bottle with a sword. It was super cool. Yeah, I've seen other friends do it with like knives and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, it could also be a little rowdy, but anyways, Rashi's talking about that. Or I don't know, it's cool. Take like a sword and like slice off the top of the barrel, and then you're like, here, people, enjoy. It's probably after you already drank a barrel or two of wine. But anyways, you would be allowed to do that on Shabbos. Good to know, right? So what would be the difference between, so how come you're not allowed to slit a neck into a shirt on Shabbos, yet you would be allowed to kind of slice off the top of the barrel on Shabbos? What's the difference? The shirt is one piece and you're slitting a neck into it, and this barrel is one piece and you're, slitting off the top of it. So the Gemara answers, Amalei Rava, so zeh chibor v'zeh eno chibor. The neck is all one piece, okay? The neck is all one piece. And when the garment was made, it was made as one piece. So you're creating this hole in it that was never there before. Whereas as Rashi says over here, 3 lines into Rashi, megufa eina min hachavis atzmo. The top of the kli of this barrel isn't actually part of the barrel. V'afalpi shedvuka bo, and even though it's stuck to the top, right? They attach it to the top. Eino chashav chibur sharei lital omedes, right? However, it's not considered really connected because it was only connected there with the intention of then removing it afterwards, and therefore it's not really considered connected. And that's why you'd be allowed to remove it on Shabbos. Rami Rabbah and R Zeira. Okay, so Rav Yirmiyah asks a kasha to Rav Zeira. Tanan, we learn in a Mishnah, Shlal shel kobsin, skip the next few words, V'abeged shu tafur b'chilayim, chibur l'tuma ad sheyaschil lahater. So, Shlal shel kobsin, what's this? So the launderers, what they would do is, let's say you had obviously everyone always loses socks in the laundry, right? So what the launderers would do was they would take like a sock and then take a thread and connect something like a sock to a pair of pants, okay? And by doing that, they would make sure that we wouldn't lose any socks, okay? So obviously this thread that's connecting the sock to the pants is not permanent. It's just while you're washing it so that they don't get lost. But ultimately he's going to be removing this thread, right? And also v'abeged shu tafur b'kilayim. If you have a garment that's made up of two pieces, and they're both made out of wool, and then you take some linen thread and you tie them and you sew them together. So obviously you're going to be undoing this linen thread when you realize that it's shatnez, right? So basically these two cloths, they're only temporarily connected to each other. So the question is, what happens if, let's say, a dead sheretz touches the pair of pants? Is the sock also tamei? Is it considered connected that the sock would also be tamei? Or is the point that since you're going to be disconnecting them in the future, they're not really considered connected, and therefore the sock would be tahor even though the pants are tamei? So that's what the Gemara wants to know, right? So it says, so the Gemara says chibur l'tuma, or the Mishnah really says chibur l'tuma. So it would be considered connected, and if a dead sheretz falls on the pants, so the sock would also be tamei ad sheyaschil lahatir. This is until you begin to remove the thread that is connecting them. Once you begin removing the thread that is connecting them, so then I think it would sound like even if, let's say let's say a dead sheretz falls on the pants, and then so now the sock is tameh, but maybe if you then disconnect them, then maybe the sock is no longer tameh. I don't know. Like, can you just kind of like lose tameh retroactively like that? I don't know, because like once you've separated them, then obviously if it touches the pants, the socks aren't going to be tameh because they're no longer connected. It could be that the chiddush is like, even though when they were connected they were tameh, but if you then disconnect them, so then the sock is no longer tameh because after all it never touched the sheretz. I don't know, I'm not really sure actually. Anyways. So the implication of this, however, is that, even when you're not actually doing the malacha, right? So in the case of the launderer, right? So the launderer, he tied the pants and the sock together. He sewed them together so that he wouldn't lose the sock. And we're saying that even if later on, when he's no longer washing them, a dead sheretz falls on the pants, the sock still becomes tameh because it's connected via the thread. So we see that even when he's not, doing the malacha with these items, still they would be considered connected. And if the dead sheretz falls on the pants, the sock would also be tameh. V'aminu. But Rabbi Yirmiyah says, look, I have a kasha. And this is from a Mishnah in Kalim. Makel shasa'ua yad lekardom chibul l'tumah b'shas melacha. So it says that, let's say you have a axe, okay? I didn't look this up. I'm pretty sure a cordom is an axe. I could be wrong. I think it's an axe. So let's say you have an axe, and all you have is the metal the metal edge of the axe, okay? And you don't actually have a handle for the axe. And you're walking in the woods, and you want to chop down a tree. So you find a nice looking sturdy stick, and you say, okay, let me connect this temporarily to this axe, so I could chop down a tree, and that's that. Okay, so that's what he does. So we say chibur l'tumah b'shas melacha. So as long as he's involved in the melacha of chopping down this tree, so then the axe and the handle would be considered connected. And if, let's say, a dead sheretz were to fall on the handle of the axe, or let's say on the metal blade of the axe, so the handle would also be tameh. But we say b'shas melacha in, shelo b'shas melacha lo. But this is only during the time that he's doing the malacha. But let's say an hour later when he's eating his lunch and he's done already chopping down the tree, so then a dead sheretz would fall on the blade. So we say that the handle would not be tameh, even though they're still connected. So that's the kasha. How come when it comes to the pants that are connected to the sock, we say that if a dead sheretz falls on the pants, the sock is also going to be tameh, even though he's no longer doing the malacha of washing? Yet when it comes to this axe, right, the handle that you connected to the axe, even though it's only temporary and you're going to be taking them apart later, so we say it's only going to be, they're only going to be considered connected as long as he's doing the malacha. But if he's done doing the malacha and he's sitting down to eat his lunch, and then a dead sheretz falls on the blade of the axe, the handle would not be tameh. So Reb Zeira answered, Amrle hasam shlo b'shas melacha adam asu lezorko v'levena eitzim. Hacha shlo b'shas melacha nami nichale di mitanfu hadar mechavelu. He said, look, there's a difference between the axe and this clothing. The axe, once he's done with the chopping down this tree, or in this case when he's done with his lunch or whatever it is, he's going to take his handle and he's going to chuck it back from where he found it, right? This is not a permanent solution. Right? He needed to chop down a tree, found a nice looking piece of wood, stuck it into the end of the axe, and that's what he used to chop down the tree. But he didn't make a permanent axe handle. He hacked it together for now. And when he's done, he's going to take it, he's going to chuck it away. Therefore, it's not considered, really connected to the axe. And if a dead sheretz falls on the blade after the fact, so the handle will remain tahor. However, in the case of this clothing, he does benefit from the fact that they are connected to each other because, let's say even after he's done washing them, one of the items will get dirty again. So thank God they're still connected because then he could just rewash them without having to reconnect them. So therefore it's beneficial to him that they remain connected even when he's done doing the malacha of washing, and therefore even when he's done, if a dead sheretz were to fall in the pants, the socks would be tamei as well. Cool. Bisura, so in Sura is where Rav lived. Masnu la shmaita mishmei Rav Chizda. So in Sura, they would teach the following statement in the name of Rav Chizda. Okay. Bepumpedisa masnu mishmei Rav Kahana. V'amla mishmei Rava. Now in Pumpedisa, which is where Rabbah was from, which is where Rav Yosef was from, Abaye was in Pumpedisa. Now I think, I could be wrong about this, I think Pumpedisa and Nahar Da'a might be the same place, in which case that means that Shmuel was there as well. And Mata Mechasya may also be Nahar Da'a, but I could be wrong about that, and that's where Rav Ashi was. But yeah, whatever. The important thing for now is that in Surah, they taught the following thing in the name of Rav Chizda, and in Pumpedisa, they taught the following thing in the name of Rav Kahana, and some say in the name of Rava. Now, Mantana Milsa Damar Abanan, and this is what, whoever said this is what he said. He said, who is the teacher who said the following statement, which is, that anything that is connected to it is considered like it. Who is the teacher who said that? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, said Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, Rabbi Meir he. You know who the Tana who said that whatever is connected to it is considered like it? Rabbi Meir, the Tanan, as we learn in a Mishnah, in Kalim. Mishnah from Kalim, it's going to be a good one. The Tanan, as we learn in a Mishnah, Beis Apach, Uveis Atavlin, Uveis Aner Shebekira. If you have a stove, and attached to the stove is some kind of smaller receptacle where you can put a small jug of oil, or maybe a little bit of spices, or a candle. I guess these are things that are useful for to have by a stove, right? Some extra oil, some spices, an extra flame. Okay. So metamin b'magav and metamin ba'avir de Reb Meir. So Reb Meir says that if a dead sheretz were to fall into the oven, okay, and fall onto the bottom of the oven, or even fall into any of these, let's just start with the oven. So fall into the oven, so then all of the kalim that are around the oven, that are surrounding the oven, these smaller kalim, they would all become tamei as well. And if a dead sheretz were to fall into one of the smaller kalim, well then the oven would be tamei as well. I don't know about the other kalim. I don't know if I didn't see anything in Rashi or anything about the other kalim, but certainly if if let's say a sheretz were to fall into one of the kalim, so the oven would become tamei. So the point is that if the dead sheretz falling into these kalim would be considered connected to the oven in turn to transfer tumah. So if a dead sheretz, let's say, falls into the oven, so then the oven is tamei, okay, because a dead sheretz is in avatuma, it touches the oven, which will become a rishon l'tumah. And we say that also it's considered connected to these other kalim that are around it, and therefore those kalim would be tamei as well. Okay? And we say ve'ein mitamin ba'avir. Now we know that a kli cheres is mitame ba'avir, which means that if a sheretz, let's say, you have a dead sheretz and it's tied to a string and you dangle the string into the kli. Now it doesn't touch the kli at all, it's just in the airspace of the kli. Okay? So the kli nonetheless becomes tamei. But what we're saying is that even though this stove would become tamei if you dangle a dead sheretz in there, however, the kalim that are surrounding it, these smaller kalim surrounding it, would not be considered connected to it and therefore would not become tamei. Okay, fine. That's Reb Meir's opinion. Reb Shimon Matar. And Reb Shimon says, no, in no situation will these surrounding kalim become tamei. Even if the dead sheretz mamish touches the inside of this stove, nonetheless, these surrounding kalim would not become tamei. They're not connected at all. So what do we see? So we see that according to Rabbi Meir, if this dead sheretz would fall onto the bottom of this stove, then these surrounding smaller kalim would also become tamei. So we see that they are considered connected to the oven, and therefore he would be the Tana, the teacher who says that anything that is connected to it is considered like it. Now the Gemara has some kashas. Now, Bishlam Reb Shimon, Kasavar Lav Kechiradam. Okay, I get Reb Shimon's opinion. He's consistent. He says, look, these smaller kalim are not considered like the stove, and therefore, whether the sheretz just dangles into the airspace of the stove, or whether the sheretz falls to the bottom of the stove, doesn't matter. The stove will become tameh, the surrounding kalim will not. I get it. Reb Shimon, pretty straightforward. Okay, these surrounding kalim are not considered connected to the stove. However, El Rabbi Meir, Ikechira Damu, if these surrounding kalim are considered like the stove, well then afilu ba'avir nami litamu, well then they should also become tameh even when the sheretz is just dangling inside of the stove. Yet we seem to be saying that when the sheretz is just dangling inside the stove, the surrounding kalim remain tahor. Now, ilav kechira damu, and if these surrounding kalim are not considered, connected and part of the stove, well then afilu b'maga nami lo litamu. Well then, even when the sheretz touches, falls to the bottom of this stove, well, if they're not considered connected to the stove, well then they should not be tameh when the sheretz falls to the bottom of the stove. So the Gemara says, Le'olam lav kechira damu. Really, in reality, me'ikar adin, these surrounding smaller kalim are not considered connected to the stove. Okay, well then, right, okay, fine. V'rabbanan hu degazubu, and the rabbis made a gezerah, and they said, look, even though me'ikar adin, really these smaller surrounding vessels are not considered connected to the stove. However, midirabanan, we say that they will become tameh if a sheretz falls to the bottom of the stove. So the Gemara says, Igazubu afilu ba'avir nami litamu. Well, if that's the case, that the Rabbanan made a gezerah that the surrounding kalim should become tameh, well then, even if it just goes into the air space, if you dangle it into the airspace of this kli cheres, of this stove, well, still the surrounding kalim should become tameh, even if it's just midirabanan. So the Gemara says, Avdu barabanan hakera kihechi delo asi lemisraf ale chuma v'kachim. So the Gemara answers that there's a reason why we make this distinction between dangling the sheretz into the airspace of the stove versus when the sheretz falls to the bottom of the stove. And that is because the Rabbanan wanted to make a clear distinction so that you'll know that this tumah is only midirabanan, right? Meaning, because by saying that these surrounding kalim only become tameh when the sheretz mamish falls to the bottom of the stove, yet if it's just dangling in the airspace of the stove, they remain tahor, you're going to say, this doesn't make sense. Just like the Gemara said, it doesn't make sense. And then the answer is, you're right, it doesn't make sense. It's because it's only midirabanan. And that way you won't come to think that the tumah is midoraisa. And what's the big deal? Because if the tumah is midoraisa, you then, if you had truma or kachim in these surrounding kalim, well then you would burn it. Meaning, if you thought that the tumah, right? If we would say that these kalim would become tameh, both when the sheretz mamish falls to the bottom of the oven or the stove, or even when it's just dangling in the airspace of the stove, you might think that the tumah is doraisa, and then any truma or kachim that's in those smaller kalim, you will burn, because we'll say that they're tameh. Therefore, the Rabbanan wanted to make a distinction, to make it clear that this is only tumah midrabanan, and therefore according to Reb Meir, the surrounding kalim are only going to be tameh if the sheretz mamish falls to the bottom of the stove, and it'll be clear then that its tumah is only midrabanan, and you won't burn any truma or kachim that were in those smaller kalim. Okay. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, maspores shel prakim. If you have a scissors that is made up of two pieces, right? They are not connected, you could take them apart. V'izmol shel rehitne, a plane of a carpenter. That's pretty cool. A carpenter's plane. It's kind of cool. Yeah, I looked it up on YouTube. Basically, it's like this tool that you would put like some kind of knife into some kind of wooden handle kind of thing. And the point is to like straighten out the wood, right? To make sure it's completely smooth and straight. So what you would do is you would put this like sharp object into like this wooden thing that's flat, and then you would run it across the wood, and any uneven things would kind of get shaved off. So it's made up of two pieces as well. So basically the point is that you have these kelim that are made out of two pieces that you then connect together in order to use them. So we say chibur lituma ve'en chibur la'azah. So we say that they will be considered connected in terms of tuma, and I assume what that means is, like, let's say that a kazayis of flesh of a dead body falls on, let's say, these scissors. So both pieces will be considered connected, and therefore even if this kazayis min hameis falls on only like one of the blades of the scissors, the entire thing will become tameh, and also the second blade will be tameh. However, ve'ein chibur la'azah, but they are not considered connected in terms of sprinkling of the water with the ashes of the para aduma to then purify it. So you would have to sprinkle this water on both pieces separately. Okay, fine. But the Gemara says, one second, manafshach. If they're considered connected, well then afilu la'azah anami. Well then even for sprinkling the paraduma ashes, the water that has ashes of paraduma, they should be considered for that as well. And and sprinkling on, let's say, one blade of the scissors would be enough for the whole thing. Ilav chiboru, and if they're not considered connected, well then afilu tuma nami lo. Well then also for tuma, if some of this kazayis min hameis were to fall on one of the blades, well then the other one should remain tahor. So Amar Rava. So Rava says Dvar Torah. So I thought Dvar Torah means halacha l'Moshe misinai, but I'm not necessarily sure. I think in this case it might just mean midoraisa. So midoraisa b'shas melacha chibur bein l'tuma bein la'azah. So midoraisa. So they are considered connected while you're using them. While you're using the scissors or this plane, so they're considered connected. And whether tuma falls, if tuma falls on it, then both pieces will become tameh. And for hazah, for doing the sprinkling of the water with the ashes of the paraduma, you would only need to really sprinkle it on one, because the whole thing on one part of it, let's say one of the blades of the scissors, because it's all considered one kli. V'shelo b'shas malacha, when you're not using it for malacha, actually using the kli, so eno chibur, then it would not be considered connected, and that's lo l'tuma v'lo la'azah, right? Both in terms of if, like, let's say kazayis min hameis falls on one of the blades of the scissors, so only that blade would become tameh, and also for azah they would not be considered connected, and therefore let's say the kazayis min hameis got on both of the blades, so you would have to sprinkle the paraduma water on both blades. Okay, but because that's like a little bit confusing, only b'shas malacha they're considered connected, but when you're not using them for malacha, then they're not considered connected. So v'gazer rabbanon al tuma shelo b'shas malacha mishum tuma sheb'shas malacha. Therefore, the rabbanon made a gezerah when it comes to tuma, even at a time when you're not using it. And let's say this kazayis min hameis would have fallen on one blade. We say, look, both blades are still going to be tameh, because that's a gezerah for when you are using it. Where if this kazayis min hameis would fall on one blade, the whole thing would become tameh. So we say, look, no matter what, whether you're using it or not, if a kazayis min hameis or anything else that would make it tameh were to fall on one part, so it would make the whole thing tameh always. And even if it's during the time that you're using it, still you have to sprinkle efer para aduma on both, let's say, of the blades of the scissors, because if it was at a time when you're not using it, you would have to sprinkle this water of the paraduma on both blades. So we say just always basically consider them connected in terms of tuma and not disconnected in terms of sprinkling of the paraduma water. Sweet. That is Daf Memches of Shabbos. Let us recap. So we started off with these two little anecdotes from Rabbah and R Zeira at the Reish Galusa. The first one was saying, do not put a kli with cold water on top of a pot, like a hot kind of pot on Shabbos, because it'll heat up the cold water. And the second one was, do not put your turban on top of a wine barrel, because a turban is something that you're makbid on, and you will come to squeeze it out, to wring it out. We talked about if you insulate a pot with these mochin, which were like these sort of more expensive fibers that you're going to make into felt. So Abaye said you may not move them. They would still be considered muktzah, even though you've used them for insulating. But the conclusion of the Gemara seems to be assuming that no, as long as if you use them for insulating, then you would be allowed to move them on Shabbos. Stuffing, stuffing pillow stuffing into a pillow on Shabbos, is that allowed? So we say that, well, it depends. If you're creating the pillow, i.e. you just have like a pillow casing and now you want to stuff it, so that would not be allowed. But if you had a pillow and some of the stuffing fell out, so you could put it back in. Okay. We talked about what happens when you have things that are temporarily joined together. Does Tumah extend to the entire thing? So for example, if you had, if a launderer connected pants and a sock together with a thread that obviously is later going to be disconnected, so we say that if Tumah falls on one piece, let's say on the pants, so then the sock would also be Tameh, and that is whether it is during the time that he's actually washing them or even later on. Because even later on, the launderer still benefits from the fact that they are connected, because if they were to get dirty, he would be able to easily rewash them because they're still connected. This is as opposed to a temporary handle that you add to an axe, that it would only be considered connected while you're using it, but after you're using it, after you're done doing the malacha with it, if a dead chariot would, let's say, fall on the blade, the handle would remain tahor, because the handle is not something, that you're planning to hold on to at all. You're just going to chuck it away immediately. You don't benefit from having it on for any longer than you need it. If you have smaller vessels that are attached to a stove, so Reb Meir says that they are tameh if a sheretz kind of falls to the bottom of that stove, and then the surrounding vessels would be tameh as well, midirabanan. And Reb Shimon says that no, whether the sheretz falls to the bottom of the stove or just is dangling into the airspace, it would always be tahor. Reb Meir says that when it's dangling in the airspace, it is tahor, but when it falls to the bottom, then the smaller vessels around them would be tameh. And the reason for this distinction is to make it clear that the tumah is only midirabanan. Then we said that scissors and planes, these items that basically are separate, but you connect them in order to work with them. So we say that basically they would be considered connected in terms of tumah. So let's say a kazayis from a dead body were to fall on from the flesh of a dead body were to fall on any part of these vessels, well, the whole thing would become tameh. And in terms of sprinkling the water with the paraduma ashes, you would have to sprinkle it on both parts separately. And this is because midoraisa, when you are using them, they would be considered connected. When you're not using them, they would be considered disconnected. So we take the stringencies of both to make sure that you're always doing the right thing, and therefore we consider them connected in terms of becoming tameh, and disconnected in terms of making them tahor again, so that you will be strict in both ways. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that daf, and look forward to learning with you tomorrow. Bye.